Aloha. Welcome to the Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking's trip around the world. My name is Cindy, and I'm an AARP Hawaii volunteer. I'll be your host tonight, and we'll be continuing our virtual trip to the Mediterranean as we make Calamari a la Plancha, a dish popular in both Portugal and Spain. On behalf of our sponsors, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, U'ala Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, and AARP Hawaii, welcome. For those of you who are new or may be unfamiliar with AARP Hawaii, we are a membership organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everyone. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can use to build or maintain a healthy lifestyle. Oh. Sorry, my thing not working.
You can go without the slide, Cindy.
Okay, thank you. Let's do a quick bit of housekeeping. The picture that you don't see should be something that you'll be seeing at the bottom of your Zoom screen on a PC and Mac, and possibly the top of the screen on an iPad. Everybody is currently on mute. If you want to submit a question or comment, please click on the button that says Q&A and type in your question. I will be monitoring the questions and making sure they get asked. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments. The chat command also isn't necessarily going to be needed unless you want to communicate a technical issue and give a participant interaction, maybe a comment. Alice Swift, Dave DeWitt, and Jackie Bolin are standing by to help, so please make sure you use the Q&A for questions and comments. We recommend that you select speaker side-by-side view rather than gallery view for this presentation. Do this by clicking on the upper right part of your screen where it says View. Once you are in that view, you can change the size of the slides or of the speaker simply by clicking and dragging on the middle bar. Oh, there we go. Finally, we have added closed captioning to this presentation for those who have difficulty hearing. You can turn this off on your end by clicking on the CC Live Transcript button in the lower right side of your screen and clicking on Hide Subtitle. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series. Take it away, Dan.
Boom. Thanks, Cindy. All right, can you hear me? Can you see me? It's all good. It's been one of those days. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's the end of April, and we have the new series kicking in next month, or the end of March. New series kicking in next month for April. And tonight we're focusing on calamari. Some of you probably have worked with calamari at home. Most of you, I'm certain, have probably eaten it in some of its many forms. It's quite popular here in Hawaii and around the world. And also, if you're a fisherman, you may have used this for bait. These are exactly the same calamari that we would use when we fished in Alaska for halibut and bottom fish. So this serves also as a really good bait for fishing. The recipe that you got tonight is very, very simple and straightforward. So actually, the focus is to go through the process of cleaning and handling the squid. We'll talk about that. Then the calamari a la plancha recipe has very limited ingredients, and it can go really quick. We'll talk about a couple different approaches to it. And I grabbed a couple other things that we can hopefully try to get to tonight as well. I did pre-clean a bunch of these. Actually, Chef Steve did for me today. Thank you, Steve. I know he's not watching, but I'll thank him anyways. And I want to try them on the grill pan. This grill pan we've used before, and we'll talk about it when we're throwing them on there. But the primary dish is done on a flat iron skillet. So just a traditional, really cast iron type of pan works fine. If you just have a regular saute pan or thick bottom pan at home, that will work also. We often use the enamel coated pans here for the show. I thought about using that. I actually like that in many ways because it's got the sides that are a little bit higher. That allows you to keep some of the splatter when something goes into the oil from coating your stove and your counter. But the visual, I think, to see it in this shallow skillet would be better for this evening. So I'll clean the mess up afterwards. And then the ingredients that we have for this dish, as I said, very simple, straightforward. We've got some olive oil. This is, again, that Spanish olive oil that we used last week. I've got a little bit left in this bottle. It's about gone. But that's an extra virgin olive oil. Really tasty, very flavorful. We've got some fresh flat leaf parsley. This will be chopped up. There's also a recipe where that can be blended with these ingredients to almost make a chimichurri or a pesto type of sauce that can be served with this calamari as well. Tonight we'll just chop it and cook it with the calamari in the skillet. Some chili flakes. This is I'm using the Aleppo pepper chili flakes. I also grabbed bird chili if I wanted to make it spicy hot, which I probably will tonight. I'm going to slice a little bit of that up there and throw it in. So if you're not looking for heat, you can eliminate that on the recipe. I put the pepper as being optional. We've got a little bit of sea salt, some garlic, and lemon, and that's basically it. So the cooking and the preparation of the calamari itself is very simple and straightforward. And then normally it would be served with a side dish. So like I said, I've got a setup here for a salad. I've got a couple pre-purchased salads that I saw that I thought would go really, really well with this. And then we're going to try to toast up some bread and show you a technique to making the perfect crouton as well. All right. Sound good? Hopefully. It's the last show before the mask mandate and all of the requirements are lifted. So congratulations to everyone. That's sort of what drove this whole entire show. That pandemic, you remember, that's still ongoing, but it's nice to see that we're progressing past that. Here is the box that I picked up. This one was 3 pounds. This is actually a larger box than you might need to pick up at home. They also make it in a 1 pound or a 1.5 pound box. And it is basically just a block of frozen calamari. That's all there is to it. It's interesting, I find, because these boxes just sit in the freezer in the seafood section, and they're like not taped. They're not wrapped in plastic or anything. Some of them are sitting in there kind of open like that. It's like the only product I've ever seen where it's just like you can open it up and there it is right there. But you can pick this up anywhere. This is California caught. It says wild caught product of USA. There's a couple different brands. So, if you like calamari or you're buying it and preparing it a lot, you might find the one that works best for you. But I find they all tend to be pretty similar in flavor, similar in size. These are about 7 inches long. I'd prefer actually if they were a little bit bigger so you don't have to work as much to prepare it, but that's okay. So we'll come back to prepping this so I can cut my vegetables and my items here before I get my hands all fishy. I'll slide this off to the side. So the olive oil is good to go. The pepper, I'm just going to slice a couple slices of this carefully, making sure not to, because this is hot, not to get it on my fingers. If I can avoid it, I'll get rid of the stem. And I'm just going to toss it into.
I don't know how to tell on this computer.
Toss it into that. And you can let me know if you have any questions, Cindy. So anytime you're working with hot chilies, just make sure you clean your knife, you clean your board before you move on to the next item, because next thing you know, you forget, you might touch your eye or something, and then you got to deal with that for the next 30 minutes. Lemon is just going to be a wedge. I can cut that right in half, and I'm going to do quarters for now. I'll come back to that. I'll probably use 2 of these, one on the salad and then one on the calamari itself. I may even squeeze a little of the juice into the pan while it's cooking. I'll set that off to the side. Salt's good to go, ready. The garlic that says slivered today. So I'm going to just take some of the larger cloves that I have, And slivered means like slivered almonds. You may pick them up in the store. It's just thin slices. You don't have to crush it for this cut, though you could. If you wanted minced garlic or something like that, you could do that. The only key or trick you got to pay attention to is whether or not your pan's too hot and you're going to end up burning the garlic before the dish is done. So with this particular one on a really hot skillet, it helps to have slivered so it will hold up to heat a little bit better than something that's cut really small.
I have a question from Pam. She wants to know, how do you clean your cutting board? And that might be in regards to the pepper.
To the pepper.
Yeah.
Right there, here I just have a wet towel. For the show, we just can wipe it down, but normally would have a bucket of sanitizer. So at the end of the night, we come through with the sanitizer. But if you just clean it with a towel, it will remove the oils and the heat that you have to worry about hitting your eye or your lips or something like that. Great question.
We also had another question about, but you answered it. Lori wanted to know, if no fresh calamari, how else can you purchase? Frozen or question mark? And you already said you get yours frozen.
Yeah, that's a good question about the fresh. I don't know, honestly, if you can get fresh here. It might be possible, maybe one of the seafood outlets, but more often than not, we're getting it frozen. I haven't worked at hotels for years. They used to get it fresh. So you can probably get it from them or the vendors that they're purchasing it from. So you might try some of the large seafood vendors here on Oahu if you want to try to get it fresh. But the frozen one works fine because it's sort of, I'm not going to say rubbery, but it has a pretty firm texture. It doesn't break down so much when it is frozen as other fish might, like salmon or tuna. So for the flat leaf parsley, I just bunched it up nice and tight. And then I'm just going to quickly go over it once, rough chop. And it's up to you. I have some of the small tender stems in here. I tend to not waste those. If you want to pick off every stem and just cut leaves only, nothing wrong with that. But for me,
Another
I don't
question coming up. Sorry, another question. Amy wants to know, when you start cooking, do you have to use a cast iron skillet? She says she doesn't have one.
You do not. You can use any pan. Just the heavier bottom, the better. What you're trying to do here is get some high heat and get the skillet or the pan really hot. So that way it'll cook quickly and it'll sort of sear it really nicely. So the hotter, the better, without starting a fire, obviously. I've got this on already, actually. Have it on low, and I wanted to preheat it. As you remember last week when we did was it last week we did the paella? And we had that large skillet, and I didn't turn it on early enough, at least to get the heat that I wanted for the dish. So tonight I have it on, and it's on as low as possible, but it'll preheat it a little bit. But yeah, any pan you want to use will work fine. So feel free. All right, so these items are all together. And now we can turn to the squid. So you can see, I think I got a blue plate, so hopefully it'll show up a little bit better than putting it up against a white plate. There's a couple different elements or components to this. We have the body, which we'll work with for sure. This is the bulk of what we'll get. So where you get the rings if you're cutting or getting fried calamari. The rings come from the body portion. And then you have the eyes and the internal organs, and then the tentacle portion. So we utilize the tentacle portion and the body here, and I'll show you how to trim that up and prep it. So what we do first is just pull the tentacles. You can even cut it if you wish, but there's two longer feeler tentacles that we remove. So those we just pull off or cut off. Throw those to the side. And then I'm going to separate the head from the body. I'm going to just pull this out. And you can see the eyes came with some of the internal organs there. There's not a whole lot to these really. And then in the body portion, there's a little piece of cartilage. It's kind of like the cartilage on the breast of a chicken. You'll feel it. It's not sharp or anything like that, but you can just grab that with your finger and it slides right out. So you can see it, kind of runs the length of the body, and that's what really gives it its structure. That's always removed. Honestly, you could probably eat it if you wanted to, but because it's not really hard, it's not like a bone or anything, but you just want to pull that out. And then there's a little bit of the guts inside. I'll squeeze those out. And then there's two little flaps. This is what guides them as they kind of like rudders as they move through the water. And we remove those, and we remove this sort of grayish skin that's on the outside. Some people leave it on. I've worked with chefs that like to leave it on. Totally up to you, but it does get a little tougher. So if you remove that, it's a little more tender. So both of those rudders would come off. And you can see the outer skin just peels right off of there like that. And then we have this one all cleaned out. And that's the part that we want for the body, just this one little piece here. Might seem like a lot of work for a tiny little piece, but that's all right. And then we have the tentacles and the eyes, and we want to cut just between the two. So right where the eyes meet the tentacles, we don't want the eyeball portion. We remove that. And then inside the tentacle portion, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it or not on there, but there's a little beak. This is their mouth. This is where they eat. So obviously the legs will be pulling the food into the little beak. So it's not hard. It's almost like a little nut, but we always want to remove that. So you just sort of pinch it and it'll pop right out. And then you have tentacles that are ready to go, and then one piece that's done. So I'll do one more really quick. So I'm going to remove the feelers that are there. I'm going to pull the head off. I'm going to remove the cartilage. Take the guts out. And I don't know if there are any questions, but feel free, Cindy. That skin just comes right off really easily. Normally I'd do this over the sink. If I had one handy, I would, but we don't here. And that makes it easy to rinse and wash. And then there you see the cartilage from the body that came out. Looks like almost like a little piece of plastic. You might mistake that for a piece of plastic if you saw it.
Okay, so I do have a couple questions. One is, how long does it take frozen calamari to thaw enough to work with? And the other one is, where did you get the calamari?
Oh, great question. I picked this one up at Times. It's at almost all your supermarkets, though, in the frozen section. And it was in a frozen block. And I put it in cold water, and it took probably 30 minutes or 40 minutes to thaw completely. And then they were just floating in there. That can then go in the refrigerator, stay for a couple days or up to a couple of days. And if you need to refreeze it or because you'll have to thaw the entire block, you can do that by making sure that you drain all of the liquid off, lay them out flat, even like this, and then put them in a smaller container and right back into the freezer. So you can refreeze them if necessary. Okay, and that I'll just discard later, and I'll finish the rest of it another time because we've got the ones here that are already done. Turn this up a little bit because it's so quick. So there's sort of two ways to go about this with the different items. We could, the recipe that I wrote has to throw the oil in the pan, followed by the calamari and the seasonings, etc. But you could also, of course, toss it in a bowl. So if we wanted to do that, we could. That's what I'll do tonight, just to make it easy. Take some of these that have been dried on paper towel. It looks like Steve didn't take the rudders off. He left those on. I asked him to take those off, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to put a few in here. And I want both, right? The nice tentacles. And we want to make sure they're nice and dry, because if you're going into a hot skillet, with something that's wet, it can tend to splatter a lot more. So you do want to be careful. A little bit of the olive oil, a bit of the chilies, and the Aleppo pepper, some of the sea salt, and some of the parsley. And I've even seen this where folks will do a little splash of white wine and then throw a cover on it, let it steam in that wine a little bit. That sounds delicious, but we're trying to be a little on the healthier side, so we'll still steer clear of that. And then this grill pan, I'm going to turn up a little bit as well, so we have it, because this goes so quick. I'll throw a couple more. It goes so quick. I'm going to do the other dish really quickly, just because once this is done, I want it to go right on the plate. Okay. And some garlic slivers. And you could probably, even if you were tossing this in advance like this, you could let this set for probably, you know, even 20 minutes or so will allow those flavors to infuse a little bit more into the calamari. All right. So the pans are getting nice and hot. I'll show you really quickly. Kind of a caprese style salad. I basically just took some items that I had from earlier dish that I was making, and then I picked up a cucumber, and I had some nice tomatoes left over. So I had some nice cherry tomatoes, some local ones. I only need, I think, one cucumber, an onion, a little bit of green onion, some peppers, and then I'm going to do the cucumber. And then I'll show you the dressing for that as well. So that just simply goes in here. Not a lot. Actually, I could even grill some of those if I wanted to, but I'm going to throw in just the straight green onions, the yellow peppers, almost like a Greek salad in a way, less the feta cheese. All right, and then a little bit of onion. If you like the red onion better, or a sweet Maui, that's fine. This is just a yellow. Thin slices. Those will go in. And then I'm going to do a quick smashed cucumber. So I've already washed it. I'm going to cut the ends off. I'll come back, split it down the middle. And then anytime you see a recipe for a smashed cucumber, it's really just kind of crushing it. Not to totally destroy it, but you're just breaking the skin and smashing some of the seeds that are in the center. And then it can simply be cut. You can see how it's just been smashed a little bit. And that opens it up, releases the juices a little bit.
So as you're cutting, I have another question about the calamari.
Yeah,
Pam
go right
wants to
ahead.
know, could you cut it in strips or rings?
You could. Either one would work. The smaller ones are more often cut into rings, the small ones like this, but you could cut strips. And you can also sometimes find a cake calamari. It's just like a steak, sometimes they're called, and they're about the size of a pancake, and they're flat like that. They work really, really nice. Those are delicious. So either cut works fine. So that's my timer. I want to throw in some bread, croutons. So I just have some sliced bread here. This is a European style bread. It's got some walnuts in it, which I thought would go nice with this. I'm doing a little bit of olive oil, a tiny bit of salt, and a tiny bit of chili flakes. That's it. I just toss it and coat those nice and evenly. You just want a little bit of that oil on the outside so it stays soft on the inside. These are going to go onto a sheet pan. When I started in the restaurant business, the steakhouse I worked at, we used to take the old bread, cut it into cubes, and then deep fry it. That was our crouton. Toss it in Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper when it came out, and people loved it. But they're like sponges. They just soak up that, they soak up all that fat. which is not exactly what we want. So these will take maybe 10 minutes at the top. So it's at 400. I'm going to turn it down to actually about 5 minutes, and we'll see where we're at in 5. That should be about ready. This is nice and hot now, ready to go. The salad, while I get ready to cook, I'm just to hit this with a little red wine vinegar. It's probably the more popular vinegar for this region. And then we had used some of the all-purpose Greek seasoning for previous classes. I saw that and I thought, oh, that would be really nice in here. A teeny bit of the oil, not a lot, just a teeny bit. And some of that parsley. Chili flakes. So keep that nice and simple and fresh. I'm going to toss that and let it sit. And you could cut those tomatoes too. These are really small and perfectly ripe. So I didn't want them to fall apart. So I'm just left them whole. And they should get nice and coated, stay nice and shiny, and be perfect for serving with the calamari. So I'll get a plate out here, and this is ready to go. It's actually really hot, you can tell. And I've got my calamari ready. I'm going to hit a splash of oil. And I've got that little flat spatula I'm going to use to move it around. Try to get one nice layer. I'm going to take a couple of for the other dish. One nice layer. That's nice and hot. So when something cold goes into the pan, it's going to pull the heat out really quickly. So I'm spreading this out nice and evenly in the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to give that a chance to sort of brown up on that bottom side. And I can throw a couple of these on the grill. Let's see if that works. If I didn't run out of gas over here. So the longer ones work great for that. Let's throw those down. That'll give us a little bit of the grilled mark texture on there. So these don't take long at all. Now I can kind of turn them. Oh, and you can smell the garlic cooking and the browning of the proteins there. The chilies, I can tell by breathing it in. Coming through in the flavor. And we want to keep an eye on that garlic so that we're not burning the garlic.
Okay, question about the calamari. Should the pieces be really dry before seasoning and cooking to get better browning?
I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. I was scratching the pan.
Oh. Should the calamari pieces be really dry before seasoning and cooking to get better browning?
Yes, always. Not only for browning, but also for your safety. If you throw it in when it's wet, it can splatter all over you. So you want to make sure anytime you're working with the skillet and oil that your product is nice and dry. So great question. And then yes, the seasoning will stick to it a little bit better.
Okay, another question. Oh, sorry.
Cindy, you can always tell when you got chili flakes going.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have done that at home, but go ahead.
Okay, Eileen wants to know, do you slice the calamari lengthwise or not?
You can. You can, those calamari pieces, you can cut any way you want, rings or lengthwise. You could just fillet them open if you wanted to do that, so that it stays one piece. You slit one side and have it open up like that. Or you could do the rings. Totally up to you. There's no wrong way to do it. Matter of fact, those steaks, and you may see if you go to YouTube or you watch videos online or the Nature Channel, some squid are 20, 30 feet long. So that's where the bodies that we have that are just a couple inches are 6, 8, 10 feet long. So that's where the large steaks come from. So there's all different sizes. This one's ready to go. Pan's a little heavy, so do be careful. Probably use a spatula, but for me, I'm just going to slide it out on here. Make sure that we have that. And now I've got my lemon juice. Little fresh squeeze across the top. And leave that on there, and you can even come back, of course, hit it with a little fresh parsley. And then our salad, this is just the one fresh salad. I would give this, 10 minutes or so at a minimum to sit and sort of let those juices come out of the vegetables, the cucumber, the peppers, and blend together with the onions from that salt. And then that'll be ready to serve as well. So I've got the grilled ones here, getting really close. And you can see how these firm up and they come back and take that shape, right? The shape that they had originally. And obviously, if you're gonna cook these whole like this, you would need to serve it with a knife, or as someone had asked already, and I mentioned earlier, you can cut it into rings. If you're doing rings, it will go a lot quicker in your skillet, so do be careful, you don't want to overcook it. And then the grill pan portion, this is really probably more the way I would cook this if I were cooking it at home, because I like the grill marks. Takes a little more work because you're like having to turn each one of them, but you do get that caramelization. You get those beautiful grill marks across the top.
Okay, question about the cooking.
Yes.
Whole bunch now. Amy wants to know, so it takes about 3 minutes to cook, and Sandra wants to know, how can you tell when it's done?
It does take about 3 minutes to cook, depending on the heat and depending on the pan. But I'm not going to say you can't overcook these, but they are pretty forgiving. It's like a chicken thigh where you've got a larger window. So 3 minutes on really high heat, like we had it here, on the low end, probably 4 to 5 minutes on the high end, depending on how full the pan is. You're really better off going with not overloading your pan and doing 2 batches as opposed to doing one batch and trying to get it all at one time, and then it pulls the heat out of the pan and you can't get any browning done. The pan can't recover. There's not enough heat from your stove. So 3 to 5 minutes should be fine for what you're doing. These are done. And what I look for here with that simple, again, any bread that you love to eat, even if it's gluten-free, they make some great gluten-free breads now, lightly tossed with a little bit of olive oil or even the spray avocado or olive oil, a little salt and pepper, and then a quick bake. That was went off at 5 minutes, but I left it for a few more. So that could go up to 10 minutes at 400. And then I've got a nice crouton that I can serve with this.
Okay, more questions all of a sudden came up.
Yep.
So Lonnie is asking, does the calamari have the 3-minute or 30-minute cooking rule? In other words, if cooked too long, it'll get rubbery. So then cook it longer, will soften.
Great question. I've never heard that rule. That was made up by the person that overcooks things a lot, probably. But it is true that proteins, including the calamari, if cooked beyond the 3 minutes or whatever the quantity, depends on the size, a lot of variables there. If it goes past its the perfect cooking time, then you can cook it longer and it can come back and tenderize. You get this with stews, but it has to be a moist heat method. So we've talked about the different methods multiple times throughout this series. If you're doing that or trying that at home, you got to make sure that the method that you're using involves some moisture. So you couldn't go 30 minutes in this pan. There's no moisture there. You basically would end up with a couple pieces of rubber. So there's some truth to that technique that I've not heard of, or that rule of thumb. But it just depends a lot on the product that you're cooking and the cooking method that you're choosing to use. So if you're doing a braise or a stew, absolutely, that would work great. Good
Okay,
job. Arlani asking that question.
I have some more questions.
Yep, go right
Lillian wants to know, I wonder if the giant squid you can buy at Kmart will work as well in this recipe. It barely needs much cooking.
Yeah, I don't know, where did you say that was purchased at?
Kmart.
Kmart. Uh-oh, we don't have Kmart, do we?
Not
Kmart's-
anymore.
Oh, Kmart, Sears. Oh, sad. Um, Perhaps. I'm not familiar with that product, but none of these take very long. So any of these pieces, I can take one here and just slice it, see how tender it is. I mean, it just basically falls apart. I should have my wife. Yummy. I don't normally eat, like I said before on the show. But that's nice and tender. And what were we were in that pan for maybe 4 minutes or so. There was quite a bit in there. Of course, more often than not, we're seeing calamari fried, deep fried. In that case, it's just a standard breading. You could take that calamari that we had here, cut it in rings, toss it with a little bit of flour, salt, and pepper. That's simple enough. And then into your air fryer, lightly sprayed with oil would work, just like we did the chicken karaage, probably last year, I guess. But it's also battered sometimes. It's also cornmeal breaded, so it doesn't have to be just flour. It can be flour and then egg and then a cornmeal mixture or some other mixture like that. But it's super, super versatile. And there's just so many different things that you can do with it. This particular recipe is crisp and fresh from the citrus that we get here with it. I gotta actually hit this other grilled portion with a little bit of lemon. Put the lemon on here.
Okay,
then
you'll be sorry. You're gonna be happy to know that Lillian said it's not Kmart, it's H Mart in Kaka'ako.
Okay. Oh, nice. My wife loves H Mart. I could never find parking. I always end up having to go to the structure there. But yeah, H Mart has some great stuff down in Salt, Kaka'ako, whatever it's called these days. But yeah, maybe they have the larger steaks. I haven't bought them, but I'll look for them next time we go. Alice, can you do that? Check in with the boss. She's the shopper. And then this is a crisp, fresh salad to go sort of with the lemony freshness of these two techniques that we had here. But I was going through Foodland Farms the other day. It's the same as Whole Foods or any of your supermarkets that have a decent deli. And I saw some salads that were just like, oh, those are perfect for this particular dish. So this one is a sweet potato and kale. So we have some fresh kale. I'm like, oh, we could saute that, but we have it coming up in some future dishes. So I didn't want to use that. But the salad that's already pre-prepared, it's slightly sweet, slightly acidic, perfect pairing with this. This is a quinoa and bulgur wheat salad. And I'm like, oh, earthy, beautiful, citrusy, perfect to go with this. And then this one was a chickpea salad with butternut squash and some cabbage in it and a little bit of fresh herbs, olive oil, salt and pepper. So I'm like, oh, any one of these salads. So if you're not able to take the time to prepare a side dish to go with it, you're just making this, there's so many really, really nice items that are out there that would pair well with it from the deli section of your supermarket. So do check that out.
Okay, some more calamari cleaning questions.
Yes.
Sandra and Pam, similar questions. Sandra wants to know, can you find it already cleaned and prepped? I'm squeamish about cleaning it. And Pam is nervous about cleaning is the beak poison.
The beak is not poisonous, and it's not, it's almost, it looks like a bird's beak. If you go online and watch a couple videos of how to prepare it, probably give you a better close up than the camera setup we have here. So I wouldn't be intimidated by it. It's not poisonous, but I have not seen it cleaned. Doesn't mean it's not out there somewhere. This was pretty inexpensive. That 3-pound box, I think, was $13 or something. So you're looking at about $4.30, $4.50 a pound, which isn't that bad. Of course, you're trimming it up, so you're probably paying about $5 a pound. or a little bit more once it's cleaned. So if you did find it cleaned, ask your local fishmonger or the guy behind the fish counter at the supermarket. He'd be able to let you know. And it would probably be, around $8 a pound if it were cleaned. And then what more than likely would be done, and you'll see this in Europe if you travel, I'm sure many of you have, they'll stuff them. So you can take these nice pieces of calamari that are trimmed and cleaned, and they're the perfect vessel to stuff with. Maybe it's a fish paste or shrimp paste or vegetable, anything you want really. And then as it cooks, obviously, you can see from the ones that we did, they tighten up and it'll wrap itself around that filling. Those items or recipes like that, probably best to be baked because you want the heat to penetrate all the way through and to cook that filling as well. But just so many different things to do with it. But it is a little bit of work. You are going to end up having to probably clean it and trim it up on your own. Yeah, any other questions?
No, you seem to pretty much covered it all. Luana said that Palama Market should have also Don Quixote and a Maracay about the giant squid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if they have the giant squid, it more than likely is not in this format. Well, maybe it is. They might have some that are like that. That would be a lot easier to clean because it's a one-shot deal, and then you could cut that as you see fit. In terms of the steaks, like I grew up in Idaho, so we don't have fresh calamari. And to be honest, I think my family would have freaked out if they saw the tentacles and things like that growing up. But we only dealt with the steaks, and they were, like I said, the size of a pancake, maybe 8 inches round. And they were about the thickness of a pancake, 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. And they were tenderized already. And that's what we would use for calamari in terms of restaurant service. So those would be breaded as in the little steak, standard breading procedure. Like I said before, flour, seasoning, egg wash, and then whatever coating breading you wanted, and then deep fried. And then those steaks would then be cut. So I've seen that. Where was it? It used to be at Uncle's, had that style. There was one other restaurant that we ran across. I don't think Uncle's is there anymore. But occasionally you will find a restaurant that serves it. And if it's been fried in a patty and then cut into a strip, that's the larger calamari steak. So yeah, try one of the Morokai or H Mart or one of the other stores where you might be able to find the steaks and make it a lot easier to work with. You do the same exact dish, but just do it with the steak.
Dan, there was one question that came up in the chat. When you cut those rings, you didn't cut they were rings because you did not cut that squid in half, right? The body is kind of a tube.
Yeah, we did not cut it at all. I'll show you some rings though. So what we do is here's like the largest one here. And it is just a tube. It's almost like a missile shape, right? Sealed at one end, open at the other end. So if we wanted rings, we would just, depending on how thick you want them, you just slice it like that. So they come out just like that. So those are the rings that you would more often than not probably see in a restaurant. So once these are fried, again, they'll just like the other ones that are whole, they'll firm up and they will take on the shape of a circle because of the natural formation of the protein. And then you have those beautiful little rings that we're so familiar with from the restaurants. So for this particular dish, I just prefer to see it whole, but it could easily be done by cutting it into rings here.
So I do have a couple more questions.
Yep, go right ahead.
Lonnie wants to know, you mentioned already tenderized. How do I tenderize the large, huge calamari meat that you had in Idaho?
Yeah, if you're buying steaks already done, it will be tenderized for you. You'll be able to see when you look at the steak that it's kind of like Swiss steak, which I don't even think see in the store anymore. But it was like a tough cut of beef that was run through a meat tenderizer, which is basically like a series of little knives on a roller, and the steak goes through and it just basically puts all of these little cuts into it. You'll be able to see it. It's visible on it, all of the different divots that go all the way through. If you're buying, like I said, the steaks already cut, should be done for you already. Now, if you're getting this shape of calamari, but it's maybe this big, so you've got the larger body portion, I don't think you would need to tenderize it. It's not that big. It's only the ones that are like 8, 10, 12 feet long that they cut into the steaks that they tenderize. So I don't think that would be an issue for you. But if you did, you can get a meat tenderizer. They make little handheld ones that have a bunch of needles that you put on meats and you press down, and the needles come out like this and tenderize it. You could take a knife and just simply poke it. So all of that tenderizing does is sort of like pre-chews it for us. So it cuts through connective tissue that's in the protein or in the muscle structure. And so that when you eat it, it's already sort of basically been bit through, but bit through by some mechanical form, not hopefully the guy that's prepping it. So.
Okay, Deanne, I think this is going to be our last question. Deanne is asking, do you slice your rings before or after cooking?
I would do it before, especially if you're breading. You kind of have to do that to get the breading all inside and throughout. For this, I honestly wouldn't slice it afterwards. I mean, you could theoretically, like I did, to do that sample to taste. But if you want them in rings, I would just always plan to do it in advance. And if you serve them whole, honestly, these are probably bite-sized for me. For my wife, Alice, it's probably like 9 bites. She calculates these things out very thoroughly. So 1 bite for me, 9 for my wife. But you would serve them if they were a little bit larger with a knife at the table. So if you look at like some of these, for me, that's easily 1 bite, but you may need to cut it in half to try it, but that's not real big. But I would recommend cutting it before cooking always. And these can be served cold as well. There's nothing wrong with this chilled. This would actually be good in a salad. I'm thinking if I were to cube that croutons that I have, toss it with some of the caprese-esque salad that I made, the crushed cucumber salad, and some sliced squid cold, that would be delicious. Because the juice from the squid and the salad would soak into the bread cubes, and it had to be served right away. But that would be a really nice salad. So it doesn't always have to be hot, but usually it is served hot. Cool. Was that the last question, Cindy? For the month of March? Is it March?
Yes, it's the month of March. Yes, we're ending up. And yes, we're a few minutes over, but that's good. And yeah, so there is one comment from Lillian Lee that says the giant squid at H Mart goes onto a hot grill for not more than 8 minutes, cut into pieces and served with a Korean sauce. I thought you'd like that.
Yep,
But yeah,
right.
Mahalo to everybody.
Aloha.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow morning.
That's right. We'll see you tomorrow morning.